It's Friday, it's the 27th of June. You're watching Arirang Korea's only global network. Live from Seoul, I'm Moon Gon-young. Well, we now have the names of all 16 teams that are staying behind in Brazil for the remainder of the World Cup 2014. And hard to say, but Korea is not on that list. The Taeguk Warriors lost their final group match against Belgium 1-0, packing up with a draw and 2 losses and not a single win. Arirang News Song Ji-sun joins us for a wrap-up of Korea's or Asia's disappointing performance on Latin American soil. Now, Ji-sun, much to the dismay of pretty much all Koreans in and outside of this country, there was no miracle in the end.
That's right, Gunny. We've been saying a lot of conditions had to be met for Korea to advance. A massive victory over Belgium, with Russia beating Algeria with fewer goals than Korea's. But those who faded fast as Korea lost 1-0 and Algeria drew 1-1 with Russia on Thursday. Now, Coach Hong Myung-bo finally changed his mind to put Kim Shin-wook as the lone striker in his lineup and even replaced goalkeeper Jung Sungryong with Kim Seung-gyu. Kim actually fared pretty well in his first World Cup, but lost a goal as Belgium's Jan Vertonghen nets after Kim failed to hang on to a shot. Just before the end of the first half, Belgium's Steven Defour was sent off for stepping on Kim Shin-wook's ankle, but the Korean squad could not take advantage of their numerical advantage. We had way more passes and attempts shot on goal than Belgium did, but most flew wide or didn't even trouble the goalkeeper. That leaves with 1 draw and 2 losses at Brazil 2014, which is the worst result in 1998 in France.
Well, like it or not, Korea's coach Hong Myung-bo now has plenty to chew on, as he has many questions to answer when he returns home. I mean, were the best 11 really the best choice for the Korean squad?
Well, I'm guessing he was pretty much waiting for that one shot from Park Ju-young, who brought him the bronze from the London Olympics 2 years ago with a goal. But that old and outdated magic did not work in Brazil. Park Ju-young, who's been sitting on the bench for most of the time in his own club, started Korea's first 2 critical matches, only to go unnoticed the whole while. Well, as you can see in the profile, Park leaves Brazil without a single goal or a run on the goal. The 2 other forwards, domestic league players, replaced Park in the second half for the first 2 matches. Lee Gun-ho, serving in the military playing for the army team Sangmu, scored while playing less than a half, and the tall Kim Shin-wook did well fighting off the Algerian and Belgian players for the ball. In the meantime, Korea's young midfielders who play in the European League showed greater potential. Son Heung-min scored in his first World Cup as the youngest player on the squad, and Captain Koo Ja-chul also played his part as Ki Sung-young backed the strikers as much as he could possibly do.
All right, Ji-sun, half of the 32 teams, including Korea, are either already home or are about to leave Brazil, but the game is on for the final 16. So how do the games roll for them from now on?
Well, aside from Belgium, 3 other teams have qualified for the next round on this Thursday, and those are Germany, the US, and Algeria. But Ronaldo misses his chance to shine at the World Cup again, despite a win over Ghana, as Portugal let in more goals than the US. With Korea's exit from Brazil, Asia will be not represented in the round of 16, and without a single victory in 24 years, the region's quota could be at a risk. And there are no matches on this Friday, giving the top 16 a day to rest and to prep for the knockout stage. 4 teams from the host continent start the second stage, with Brazil versus Chile at 1 p.m. on Saturday, local time. But Luis Suarez won't be able to play for his national team, as the World Cup 4 was banned from 9 international matches for biting the Italian opponent in the last match. On Sunday, the top scoring squad of the Netherlands, at 10 goals, will go against Mexico. See if Mexico's goalkeeper Guillermo Ochoa can keep the free-scoring Dutch squad at bay.
We sure will keep our focus on World Cup for the remainder of the World Cup games. Thank you, Ji-sun, for that. Now, Team Korea's early exit from the World Cup is a bitter pill to swallow for all of its supporters. And although many knew at the back of their heads that making it to the next round was a long shot heading into today's game, the Red Devils turned out in force for watch parties nationwide in hopes of a miracle. Our Shin Se-min was out on the streets of Seoul.
Upset about losing the match against Belgium, Korean fans left the last cheering venue for the Brazil World Cup with their heads held low. Korea's elimination also spells the end to all Asian hopes in the tournament. Thousands of fans had been cheering on the streets in front of COEX in southern Seoul since early Thursday evening, some 10 hours before the kickoff. The fans, hoping a red card for Belgium in the first half would make it easier to win, couldn't hide their disappointment after the game.
I thought we had the advantage when I saw the Belgian player get a red card. I really think we could have done a better job.
Even against a Belgium team down to 10 men, the game didn't go well. The result is very regrettable. I wish there was another chance.
The fans spent all night waiting, and pre-game K-pop performances were held at the venue to keep the early birds motivated and entertained. With the fall of the national team in Brazil, some supporters are already looking ahead to the 2018 World Cup.
It's a great shame we didn't make it to the last 16. Now we'll just wait for the next World Cup in 4 years' time.
Failing to advance to the final 16, Korea will have to go again in 2018 World Cup in Russia. The fans had fun, and everyone thanks the squad for trying their best in Brazil. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
When the latest news meets the latest business stories, we give you a bigger and better picture of the world. Business Today with Moon Gon-young. Every weekday, only on Arirang.
Japan has come up with a final draft for a reinterpretation of its pacifist constitution. That paves the way for reaching a consensus on the change, which Kyodo News Agency says could come as soon as July 1st. Now, the draft says Japan will ensure that its history as a pacifist state continues while adhering to its non-nuclear principles and pursuing robust diplomacy to stem the emergency of threats. Japan has long maintained that it has the right to collective self-defense under international law, but cannot exercise it under Article 9 of its constitution, which bans the use of force to settle international disputes and only allows the minimum for self-defense. Well, the diplomatic dynamics in Northeast Asia are complex to say the least, with historical and territorial differences meeting head-on with security concerns. But the relationship between North Korea and Japan have been cozying up of late, and our Connie Kim reports on the latest developments.
North Korea and Japan relations are improving. Pyongyang on Thursday allowed 9 Japanese nationals into the country to visit the burial sites of their relatives who died in the communist state after the Second World War. Now, this is the first such visit since North Korea and Japan came to an agreement last month on opening an investigation into the whereabouts of Japanese abductees kidnapped by the North decades ago.
After a lot of efforts between the Japanese and North Korean government, our hope has finally come true.
There have been 8 visits like this one since 2012, but yesterday's comes amid a new dynamic in Sino-Japanese relations. Diplomats from Tokyo and Pyongyang will meet in China next week to discuss the details of a probe into the abduction of Japanese citizens in the 1970s and 80s. North Korean officials are set to explain how a special committee plans to carry out its investigation. Now, if Japan feels the North is doing enough to reopen the probe, unilateral sanctions imposed by Tokyo on the North Korean regime could be eased, including the lifting of a ban on North Korean vessels into Japanese ports. Chinese diplomatic sources say North Korea is seeking out talks with Japan for its own political interests in light of strained ties with China. Chinese President Xi Jinping will be visiting Seoul next Thursday for a state visit, but will not be stopping by Pyongyang. Traditionally, Chinese leaders have made it a point to visit the North before coming to Seoul. South Korea's ties with Tokyo, meanwhile, remain strained over differences regarding historical matters that date back to Japan's colonization of the Korean peninsula. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Well, in what's been a regular occurrence of late, North Korea launched 3 short-range projectiles into the East Sea Thursday afternoon. However, unlike other recent tests, this one centered on a new type of missile that South Korean authorities say had never been fired before. Our Kim Yongjoo reports.
North Korea claimed Friday that the 3 projectiles it fired into the East Sea on Thursday were newly developed state-of-the-art precision-guided missiles. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un was at the scene on Thursday and watched over the launch process. The missiles were airborne for around 190 kilometers before landing in waters between North Korea and Japan. The projectiles bear a similarity to North Korea's KN-09 missiles, but the maximum range was 40 kilometers further than a KN-09.
The primary goal of North Korea's every activities regarding the threatening other neighboring countries, particularly towards Seoul and Washington, is to stabilize or solidify about Kim Jong-un regime's survival. They want to make a new pressure toward getting back to the 6-party talks, the so-called denuclearization process.
In February and March, Pyongyang fired off ballistic missiles and short-range projectiles on 8 separate occasions. In March and April, the regime conducted numerous naval exercises near the northern limit line, increasing inter-Korean tensions along the border. Some experts say the most recent firing was initiated to unite North Korean troops behind Hyun Yong-chol, who is the new minister of the People's Armed Forces, after Chang Jong-nam was relieved of this post.
In one way, it could be seen as a test of the military's missile capabilities. It could also be a way to check the response times of the U.S., South Korea, and Japan.
Following this latest test firing, the South's Defense Ministry says it's on alert for additional provocations from the North. Kim Yongjoo, Arirang News.
Now, remember that new Hollywood comedy which deals with an assassination plot against North Korean leader Kim Jong-un? Well, it has caught the attention of Pyongyang. Now, Pyongyang warned that the release of the film, which is due out in the fall, would be an act of war. The co-director of the movie says Pyongyang is just overreacting. So, will the film hit the theaters? Our Kwon So-ah has more.
Could a comedy movie trigger a war? According to our North Korean Foreign Ministry spokesperson, yes. North Korea has come out all guns blazing against the first-ever American movie dealing with its leader, Kim Jong-un. The Interview is an action comedy that centers on how a talk show host and his producer, played by James Franco and Seth Rogen, embark on a CIA mission to assassinate Kim. Rogen, who also co-directed the movie, says he was inspired by journalists making trips to the communist country and hypothetical discussions on how they would be in the ideal position to assassinate the world's most dangerous people. But as can be seen in the trailer, the movie is hardly sinister in nature. However, it was enough for North Korea to call the movie an act of terrorism and an act of war. Pyongyang's foreign ministry spokesperson threatened merciless retaliation if the film is released. Seth Rogen is not taking the threat too seriously. Upon hearing of the North's reaction to the teaser, Rogen tweeted, "People don't usually want to kill me for one of my movies until after they've paid $12 for it." Days before the North's threat, Rogen had tweeted, "Apparently Kim Jong-un plans on watching The Interview. I hope he likes it." The Interview is expected to hit big screens in the US in October. No word yet on whether it will be released in South Korea. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Well, North Korea's economy has been in the black for 3 straight years now, but the economic gap between South and North Korea continues to widen. Data from South Korea's central bank shows that the North nominal gross national income was roughly $33.3 billion last year, which is around just 2.3% of South Korea's GNI. And while North Korea's growth rate last year was 1.1%, It represents a drop of 0.3 percentage points from a year earlier, mainly due to contraction in the construction sector. Well, Korea posted its current account surplus for the 27th consecutive month in May, the second longest streak in record. Now, the Bank of Korea says preliminary data suggests that the surplus reached $9.3 billion last month, which is down 4.6% from the same period last year, but up more than 30% from the previous month. The central bank attributes the bump to improved conditions for exports of shipping and petrochemical products and the economic recovery in developed economies. But on the factory output side, Korea's production in the mining and manufacturing sector dropped last month by the biggest margin in more than 5 years, and it's raising concerns of a slowing economic recovery. But analysts say it's still a bit too early to call the drop a trend. Hwang Ji-hae tells us why.
Korea's pace of economic recovery is in question once again, with the nation's output in the manufacturing and mining sector falling 2.7% in May from a month earlier. That marks the biggest drop since December 2008, when the global financial crisis broke. Statistics Korea says that the output drop came largely from the automobile and semiconductor industry, which saw sluggish exports last month. The output in the auto sector plunged nearly 7.5% in May from the previous month, while chip and parts production dropped 4.7%. But the statistics agency attributed the dip in exports to fewer working days in May, prompted by long holiday weekends. In fact, while Korea's overall exports dropped nearly 1% last month from the previous year, the average daily export volume rose 6% to over $2 billion, and it's the second highest level in history. The statistics agency also said that the Korean economy hit a low point sometime in late 2012 or early 2013, and that based on that analysis, the economy should now be on a rebound trend. Korea's service sector output also rose 0.6% in May from a month earlier, after declining more than 1% in April, a sign that the economy might be out of the sluggish private spending trap brought on by the deadly ferry disaster. Hwang Ji-hae, Arirang News.
Well, Korea's minimum wage is about to go up, although not by as much as labor groups had hoped for. A government committee on Friday passed a bill on raising the minimum hourly wage to 5,580 Korean won. That's about $5.50 starting next year. That is up some 7% from the current level. Now, labor representatives had been asking for a hike to about $6.60, which would have been a 27% increase, citing economic growth and inflation. But representatives of employers had said that a further hike would put a bigger burden on SMEs. Now, last summer, strict limits on electricity usage were put in place to prevent power outages in this country. This year, it will be different. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy said Thursday that the country's peak power demand during the summer will reach an estimated 79 million kilowatts, well under the maximum generation capacity of 84.5 million. Now, last summer, when a number of nuclear reactors were shut down due to safety concerns over fake security certificates, the capacity was just 77 million kilowatts. Public and government offices will remain subject to the restrictions and will be required to maintain an indoor temperature of 28 degrees Celsius or above. Now, commercial buildings had been required to keep temperatures at 26 degrees Celsius in previous years, but this summer they'll only be advised to do so. So some definitely good news for the average Korean like myself, but will there be consequences? To help us understand the situation better, Dr. Kim Yongjoo joins me live in the studio. Dr. Kim, let me tell you, 28 degrees Celsius, it's not a very pleasant environment to be working in. So, you know, this government measure to, I suppose, ease regulations or restrictions on these measures that were put in place to conserve energy, that's good news, right?
Right, I think so. You know, for example, you know, in mentioning all those kind of new developments here, one thing that we should keep in mind is that if you happen to be a shop owner, and if you keep your front door open and run your air conditioning, you can be fined indeed. You will be warned first time, and then your fine could all the way go all the way up to like 3 million won. So that's one practice that you should be watching out for. Starting from July 7th. So there will be that practice that applies to common citizens, ordinary citizens, I suppose, unless you're an unlucky government official who will have to bear with 28 degrees Celsius there. Other than that, all other kinds of restrictions that used to be you know, mandatory last year will be all recommended practice. As you mentioned, 26 degrees Celsius for large buildings, they will be all recommended, but not mandatory here. And the government is saying they'll pay particular attention to the students and ordinary citizens so that their you know, inconveniences will be minimized, unlike what happened last year. So overall, it just indicates that the situation overall is improving for sure.
Right, so this is on improving electricity supply, right?
Right, exactly. As you mentioned, some of the numbers. Let's bring up the rest of the numbers to show our viewers the overall trend of this demand and supply situation on the screen here. Okay, so on the far right-hand side, as you can see, the projected demand and supply. The supply side, large, you know, surplus indeed, as compared to the projected demand. And demand falls from last year because of the weather situation. It's expected that this year, on average, the temperature will be 2.2 degrees Celsius lower than last year. And we're expecting in August, on average, 25.1 degrees Celsius as the monthly average, unlike last year. So who knows? But whether that's something that you can never be sure of. So that's the projection for now. There is that variable. If weather changes, this will not work out. And also, the improved supply situation here you're seeing on the screen is because of the nuclear power generators that are fully in operation. Not entirely fully. According to reports, I think we still have about 2 nuclear reactors out of operation, but unlike last year, there was on average about 5 or 6 of them out of operation. So this year, as you can see on the screen, we have 6.5 megawatt extra, you know, energy supply and electricity supply that's available at this point. But however, there's another variable right there, because who knows what's going to happen with the nuclear reactors, you know.
Because right, we hear them, you know, shutting down once in a while because of its malfunction here and there and the old age, I suppose.
But the government has a big stake here because, you know, last year the reputation was so bad, they're paying particular attention to making sure that nuclear reactors will function better this year. Let's wait and see on that one. So at least the projection is pretty good, so we can be rest assured that the overall situation is better. Actually, these days I feel myself in you know, Seoul metro subways and stuff, stations and then platforms. I feel that the temperature is much cooler, much better than last year. But then again, it's not August yet, so we'll have to wait.
Right. And, you know, but do I sense a correlation between this news and the recent announcement of a electricity charge freeze?
Right. That is a challenging question. A lot of people wonder about that. One explanation is perhaps the government is not feeling as much urge to discourage the electricity consumption on the part of the consumers. So if you raise the price, it's a discouragement. And if you keep it right there, you know, discouragement is minimized. So overall, because of the better situation, supply situation, you may argue that government has decided to freeze the price for now. The government, especially the industry and energy minister, has mentioned, I think it was 2 days ago, overall there will be extra tax on coals being used for power generation. However, the coal price overall is falling, and overall the value of Korean won is strengthening. So situation, the total situation, they can handle it better with the you know, the price frozen at the current level. But this was a big surprise to the market because everyone, including myself, was expecting price hike this year.
Right, right. And that announcement that that they will keep the electricity price, the same level for some time, that actually sent the price of KEPCO shares in the tailspin, right? And how will KEPCO deal with this situation?
That's a big question. KEPCO, their finance is not good, and they really needed, from the company perspective, they really needed this price hike this year. A lot of people thought, and including myself, we took it for granted that price hike will be actually coming sometime July or so. So this was a big shock to the market, 7% drop on their stock yesterday alone. And we'll have to wait and see on the continuing reactions from the investors. But KEPCO investors, big disappointment for sure.
Well, definitely, we hope that this summer will not be as hot as last summer, which was, I think, one of on-record heat waves that we had last summer. And hopefully, people will voluntarily conserve energy, as much as they can, but stay at a pleasant temperature.
I agree.
All right, Dr. Kim Yongjoo, thank you so much for today. We'll see you next week.
Okay.
And that's your business today on this Friday. Thank you for watching, and do join us again at 6 p.m. Korea time on Early Edition at 6.